Christmas came early for Tampa Bay Lightning fans tonight as the Lightning picked up a spectacular win at home in their last home game before Christmas. We get into all of that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Decker. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Before we get into anything else, I just want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. On this episode, we are reacting minutes after the Lightning picked up the big win at home against the Vegas Golden Knights, 5-4. And boy, before we get into all that, I just want to just remind you all, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We are also available on YouTube, so subscribe to our channel on there as well. And so we are reacting only about minutes after the game, and wow, all I could say, this was a big time win for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I spoke about it really just in excess for this team, because this upcoming stretch for, you got Vegas tonight, Capitals over the weekend, Florida next week. And then you got the Rangers coming up with a very feisty team in the Montreal Canadiens to round out 2023. But this was as good of a game as it gets for your Lightning team. And I spoke about it coming into this game on yesterday's episode. If the Lightning had any hopes of winning this game against not only the defending Stanley Cup champions, but the best team overall in the league, they needed to come out and replicate that winning effort that they had from their win back in November against the Boston Bruins. And they brought that and more into this game. So we start off the game with kind of a stereotypical Lightning scenario. They don't take care of the chances that they have afforded to them. I wouldn't say that they were overwhelmed. I thought that regardless of the 2 goals by Vegas in the first period to get out to a 2-0 lead, I didn't think that the Lightning particularly played bad. 2-0 didn't seem like that big of a deficit. But as you know, with this Lightning team, especially going into the second period, that's why it's so important for this team to get a good start. And I will say I had my doubts going into the second period, and boy, did the Lightning freaking bring it, because they go on to score 4 goals. 4 goals, that is correct, in the second period. And it was all due in part to a fight that Brandon Hagel had against Ivan Barbashev. And I mean, we could just talk. We'll talk about more about that in the second segment of the show. But that was really just it. I know that Nick Paul was the first star of the game. Obviously, he scored the game-winning goal, and he deserved so. But I think if you really want to know why the Lightning won this game and where they were at, that Brandon Hagel fight and the subsequent reaction from the fans afterwards is where we saw the game shift in favor for the Lightning. That doesn't happen. We're talking about a completely different result tonight. We'll get into that in the second segment. But right now we're talking about the really the I guess the just what now? And what does this mean for the Lightning? This is as big of a win for the Tampa Bay Lightning as they could possibly have imagined going into this upcoming stretch of games. Because like I said, this is the kind of stretch where, as Lightning fans, this was a good heat check stretch for us as a team. And I'm not only saying that, I'm saying us because as the fans, it's also a heat check for us to see where this team is at and to where our expectations realistically should be. And after this game, after this big win, in which I firmly believe, and this isn't recency bias, I firmly believe that this is the biggest one of the year, because it kind of shows you, yeah, we've had our struggles. We haven't played up to potential. But we could hang with the best on any given night as long as we play the right way. And the Lightning played the right way for the most part in this game. I think if I had to put a percentage on it, I would have to say probably 95% of this game was played correctly by the Lightning. Say what you want about the score. Ideally, 4-2 should have been the score. Maybe 5-2 should have been the score. But the other 5% was really the beginning of that third period, going into the mid part of the third period. Vegas starts to get back into it. The Lightning, just along with kind of like the mini meltdown that Nikita Kucherov had, just kind of fall back to their old habits and let a very good hockey team get into it. And, tomorrow we probably will be saying, all right, let's dial it back. This Lightning team did play well. They had a very good night against a very good hockey team. But at the end of the night, you look at the goaltending. You look at Vasilevsky, who, I don't think he played a horrible game. I don't think he played spectacularly great. He made a great save at the end of the game to win it, really. Nick Paul had the game-winning goal, but I think that, Vasilevsky makes a couple of very good saves down the stretch, especially, I believe it was 6 seconds left in the third. That's really what seals the deal for you, and that's what you're looking for. But I think that, one of the storylines will be tomorrow, and especially when we have 24 hours to think about it. I think, the Lightning facing a goaltender in net for Vegas, who is only making his fourth career start, is going to be something that maybe us as a fan base will kind of look at and say, okay, let's take this one with a grain of salt. But at the same time, I will say to Lightning fans that, it's not always the goaltender that loses the games for you. You have a goaltender, like I said, not much time spent at the NHL level, but still has a very good team around him, still very good physical team for the most part. I thought Vegas was disciplined, regardless of the fact that they were on the penalty kill 4 times and let up 2 goals. I just think that this was a big, intense game between 2 teams that were on their A game tonight. A game that I feel like whenever these 2 teams get together, it's very intense. It has that playoff atmosphere. It definitely did. I mean, Amalie was absolutely rocking tonight. If you were in the crowd tonight at Amalie Arena for this game, let us know in the comments below what it was like. Because, on TV, it was unbelievable. It was the closest thing that you could potentially get to going to a playoff game as you could without actually going to one. That was unbelievable energy from this crowd, and the players were feeling it early on. And, you could tell that it was going to get chippy sooner rather than later, and it did. And just whenever the Lightning play against Vegas, just something comes out of them, an extra gear. And you saw it tonight from every single player on this team. Except for the, like I said, the stupid unsportsmanlike penalty that Kucherov takes in the third period, I thought this was as good a all-around performance as it could get against a very good hockey team that the Tampa Bay Lightning have had this year. And I mean, really, you go up and down the scorecard. I mean, really, where do you start and giving out flowers to? Because everybody played well in this one. Nick Paul had the game-winning goal. He had 3 points on the night. Alex Barré-Boulet just scoring a goal, improving constantly, as I've said for the last 2-3 seasons, proving that he deserves to be at the NHL level. Mikey Esamont, who was just all over the place, disregard the plus minus. He was all over the place tonight, making moves and disrupting the Vegas Golden Knights. Brandon Hagel was the man of the hour tonight, who I think, for all the goals that he has scored in his very short time with Tampa Bay, I think he had his iconic Bolts moment tonight. That fight that he had in the second period that really jump-started the Lightning. I mean, when you look at the reason why the Lightning won this game, that was it. And you look down even more. Nikita Kucherov, another multi-point night. What else can you say about this guy? Stamkos had a point tonight. He was also very involved in the cycle game. Braden Point, 2 goals tonight. He was an offensive machine, had 3 points on the night. And on top of that, Vasilevsky, I think, like I said, played a very good game and made the big saves when it counted. So a phenomenal goal, a phenomenal game from this Tampa Bay Lightning team, a phenomenal performance, and really just a great start to what is the start of a 4-game stretch to end the new year against 4 very good teams that are all right now currently in the playoff spot. So aces across the board, and coming up in just a little bit, we'll be talking about that second period because that was wild. I mean, if someone ever wants to, if the Lightning go on a stretch like you would not believe, someone could eventually, especially if the Lightning go on to win the Stanley Cup, someone could definitely make a documentary based off of that second period, because that was just everything from what was happening on the ice to happening in the stand was unbelievable. It was iconic. So we'll get into all of that in just a bit, but I want to first talk about our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, listen, passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So as always, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and subscribe to our channel there. Hit that thumbs up button below this video, as well as drop a comment below. Like I said, if you were at the game tonight, please just drop a line, drop a comment. Let me know what it was like. I mean, I never had as much amount of fear of missing out as I did tonight when just the noise that was coming from the people in the stands. The only other time I could really think about where it was that loud was the Stanley Cup Finals, in which the Lightning played, against Montreal, against Colorado. Obviously, we didn't have it in 20 because of COVID, but it was I can't even equate it to a playoff game because I feel like, a Stanley Cup Final Series game is the only time I've ever heard it that loud in that building. And the energy from the get-go was unbelievable. I mean, you could cut the tension in the building with a knife, especially going into the second period. The Lightning are down 2-0. And it just, everyone's kind of on pins and needles. I said it before the game, the thing that made me nervous going into this game more than anything was the fact that the potential for it to go so wrong so badly. And it couldn't have gone any better. And it kind of seemed like it was starting to go bad in the first period after the Lightning go down 2-0. Like I said, weren't exactly playing terrible. They were still in it. 2-0 didn't seem like that insurmountable of a lead to come back, or a deficit to come back from. And then the Lightning start off the second period, and it's just, you're just waiting for, you see the Lightning doing a lot of good things. They're not really getting or making much progress in the offensive side of things. They're getting shots off here and there. And you're seeing Vegas kind of just parrying the punches. You're not doing anything too fancy, not really laying their bodies around too drastically. I mean, they didn't really need to. It was just kind of a feeling out moment. And the building was a little quiet. You could feel the uneasiness in the air. And after the hit on Cirelli, Brandon Hagel goes absolutely bonkers, throws it down with Ivan Barbashev. And I was trying to tweet it out in time for the fight, because I was like, oh, nice, Hagel's fighting. Who's he fighting? Ivan Barbashev? Oh, boy. I mean, in case you're not entirely familiar with Ivan Barbashev, he was rookie on that Blues team that won in 19, won the Stanley Cup. And he was a big part of the reason why they won that year. And he was actually on the top of my list last season as for the top player that I wanted the Lightning to get at the trade deadline. Obviously, they didn't get him, and the Lightning ended up getting Tanner Jeannot instead, which is, they're basically the same player to a certain extent. They do a lot of the same things. But Barbashev's a big dude, man. And that was my worry, is that, oh, man, Barbashev, all he needs is one hit, one clean one on Hagel. And you could tell by the way Hagel was fighting, he knew it too. I bet he was saying to himself, I can't let him land one flush on me. And no, he didn't. He stuck with him. And Hagel, like I said before, with that fight, and not only that fight, but not losing, holding his own against Barbashev, completely changed the entire complex of the game. And you could see the building completely awakened. The fans were just going nuts. I was sitting at home completely shocked that not only Hagel finished that fight, but he finished it in one piece and, didn't suffer any damage. And man, I mean, that is the kind of thing to not only have that. I mean, it's very uncommon to see a player get into a fight and trying to get things going, and it works perfectly in the way that Brandon Hagel did it and orchestrated it too. It's very few common occurrences where you see that actually happen, and it is executed to the T. And I can't tell you how valuable that is to have on your team. That kind of player, a guy like, let's just say that, Brandon Hagel, I mean, for the first off, he was brought here to score goals. And he is slowly, especially over last year and this year has turned into just this special player that if he continues to build upon his accomplishments, his goals, his points, now he's at it. Really, he's starting to become a more physical player. I mean, this guy is going to be so valuable to this franchise in the next 5 years. He's going to be wearing a letter on his sweater at one point. Most likely it will be an A. But, I mean, the guy completely won over in terms of getting that game back on track, won over the entire team. The energy level was absolutely through the roof after that, not only for the team, but for the fans. And I have not seen the Lightning skate with that much purpose and consistency in quite some time. I would have to date back to 2020, the playoff run in the bubble up in Canada during COVID. That is as raw of an emotion in terms of just getting after it that I have seen this team skate consistently with in years, in seasons. And like I said before, if the Lightning go on to win a cup and they go off to rattle off a ton of wins and not only get back into the playoff picture, but also get into the Stanley Cup playoffs in the top three or whatever, and eventually go to Stanley Cup and win, this is where we got to look at it and say, that is when the season turned around. And it was all because of Brandon Hagel. Scoring 4 goals, the team scoring 4 goals. You know, they did fall behind late. They did end up having the game tied by Vegas, you know, because of some unfortunateness with the team just not playing well as Nikita Kucherov taking a bad penalty. But this team, that was just an unbelievable performance, an unbelievable second period. One of the best second periods I've seen them play in quite some time, given also considering the fact that they are one of the worst teams in the second period, I think, of the league, as well as, you know, the fact that they were playing against the best team in the NHL. So what a phenomenal night. Let us know in the comments below what you think about that. I mean, just we're gonna continue to reflect on this night of hockey because it is really something that we cannot stop talking about. And I'm sure on tomorrow's episode we'll continue to talk about it and reflect upon it even after 24 hours. So in just a bit, we'll wrap things up. But first, I want to talk about our last sponsors of the day, and that is our friends over at the Sleeper app. Now, a new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities, and Nikita Kucherov could score 50 goals this year. It's a real possibility. After this big win tonight, the Lightning could very, very well be on their way to win a Stanley Cup, and you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you could win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. Now, all you got to do is pick Brandon Hagel, Nikita Kucherov, and Nick Paul to record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. So use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. So wrapping things up on the show, as always, I want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. You could also subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. And we are continuing to just discuss this unbelievable night of hockey for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Being down 2-0, and then just having and I don't use this word, and you know if you've been listening to this podcast, I don't use this word lightly, and I don't think I ever have probably on this show. An iconic performance from this team, because the implications of if this team does it the right way, how far they could go, especially after the performance they had, the grit, the fight, literally and figuratively, that they had tonight, could really propel this team to a whole nother level, not only in the standings, but just in level of performance. And I spoke about it so much going into this 4-game stretch about how important it was. If the Lightning I would be perfectly fine if the Lightning would go into this 4-game stretch against Vegas, DC, the Rangers, and the Panthers and win 2 out of 4. And I would be perfectly happy with that. But they get off to a phenomenal start in this 4-game stretch against the defending Stanley Cup champions, if the season ended today, the President's Trophy winners. And they not only defend their ice, but they do it in one of the most dramatic ways I've seen this team win in quite some time. Scoring 4 goals in the second period. Brandon Hagel, really the star of the night, even though he didn't really do anything in terms of scoring points or scoring goals, I mean, he really was the fire starter for this team. He ignited a fire in this team that I've not seen in quite some time. Like I said, I haven't seen the team play with this much tenacity, this much pep in their step, this much this much heart since their first run to the Stanley Cup finals in 2020 in the bubble. It was unbelievable, and the atmosphere in Amalie was just insane. And this team really, they took a huge step tonight. And I know everyone listening is going to say, well, can they carry that over into the next game? If they play just like this, which is very replicable, I mean, yeah, you got to cut down on some mistakes. But they did everything right. And that's what I said when I laid it down on the previous episode, what this team needed to do. They needed to play with discipline. Yeah, in a game like this where it's high octane, it's going to be very physical. You're going to draw your penalties. It happens. But they stuck within themselves. They stuck within their game. They didn't get too crazy. They were very good for the most part on the penalty kill. Vegas only went 1 for 4, where in return the Lightning went 2 for 4 on their power plays. The Lightning did a very good job in the face-off circle, and they were populating the net with traffic and as well as shots and playing physical and not giving up when things didn't go their way. And that's all you could ask for. And you had a performance, a very good performance, top to bottom, from a lot of players on your team. And I said that was the main thing that this team needed to do in order to get going in this game. Not everybody got points, but everybody contributed in some way. And I mean, it cannot be overstated how important the depth for this Tampa Bay Lightning team is, especially in games like this. And it's going to be very important for this team as they go forward, not only for this 4-game stretch down the line to end 2023, but as the season continues, because, you got a lot more mountains to climb as the season comes ever closer to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the Lightning definitely have their fair share of mountains to climb, considering they are currently not in the playoff race. Now, that may not change. That may change a little bit after tonight. We're still waiting on some games to be final. But, I mean, as good as a Christmas gift as you could get, a phenomenal win at home for Lightning fans. I mean, they could very much now the possibility of winning on Saturday, because when I looked at the stretch, one of the games that I had checked off as a win for the Lightning was the Washington game. And I was hoping maybe either the New York game or the Florida game would have been a win. But now you're talking about possibly going into your matchup with your division rival next weekend, possibly. Now, nothing's guaranteed, but possibly going into a division rival game, winners of your last 2. And against very good teams. And if the Lightning could pull that off, I mean, game on. I think this team could very well be back on the track to not only get back into the playoff picture, but also possibly steal a top 3 spot in the division for one of those playoff spots. So the Lightning will be going into this weekend on a 2-game winning streak, possibly getting for 3 in a row. But we'll be back tomorrow to talk all about that, as well as preview that game up in DC. So in the meantime, That's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.